I see Desiree. I have huge respect for all of you, and Lydia as well. Thank you so much for your contribution, to the growth of women's football, and doing so even amidst all the challenges that you face in your different countries. It's really important to understand that we are living in a time where the conversation can no longer be under the table, not even in the media space, not even in terms of sponsorship. We're seeing so many companies coming on board. If you look at, for example, Sasol in South Africa, that have sponsored the women's competitions for over 10 years now, you see that their progress to qualifying for their first ever FIFA Women's World Cup is not a coincidence. It is actually something that has been planned throughout. Now, we need all the countries across the continent to do the same. Of course, Nigeria has made tremendous progress, as record champions of the Africa Women's Cup of Nations, but also at club level. If you see a world-class player like Asisat Oshowala playing for Barcelona, and she came from the league in Nigeria, it just goes to show that actually there's hope that these young girls can make it from the grassroots level through our structures in Africa and make it to the top class of participation in World Cup. Sorry, can someone
keep pushing mountain.
Hi, Dr. Hayes. My name is Lydia.
Go on, please.
All right. So yes. So I'm just looking at the entire continent, and it's interesting really when you look at a country like Morocco hiring an entire technical department to look at the growth of their women's football at the clubs, at the underage teams, under 17, under 20, under 23s, and the senior team. They've hired some of the best technical people from across the world to take over and really put in line what is going to help them to get to the top of the table, really. And by that I mean to join the big girls, South Africa, Nigeria, Cameroon, and then looking at it from an East African point of view. In East Africa, and let me begin with Uganda. In Uganda, we are using a structure where it's the secondary schools that actually have most of the participation in our national league. So it means that most of our players are actually teenagers, and so they're playing so many games at a very young age. So it's easy to see why we have teenagers that are making up our senior national team. So you can imagine if they grow together in that systematic way and play together for about 10 or 15 years, it could actually be a very good way of doing things. So that's really at the national level. But when I look at it from a CAF point of view, 2 years ago, we had a seminar, the CAF Women's Symposium in Marrakesh in Morocco, and a couple of things were said and promised about the women's football development in Africa. I would like to say that one of the biggest things that came out of that symposium was the creation of a CAF Women's Department. And thankfully, we know the two ladies that are working in that department, Safia Del Aem from Egypt, and also Meskerem Goshime, who we usually call Meski, from Ethiopia. Very, very experienced ladies. And for Meski, who was Assistant Secretary General in Ethiopia, bringing a lot of experience into the administration of women's football. And also they've been trying to have that conversation. When CAF hosted the technical directors conference a couple of months ago, they made sure that women's football was on the agenda, to ask all the technical directors in Africa, what is your plan for women's football? We know that FIFA provides money through their FIFA Forward program, money that should go towards women's football. But some of the countries and federations in Africa are not using that money to promote women's football. So the money just goes to waste. It's there, but no one is claiming it. No one has the structures to run women's football programs. So it is up to CAF to make sure that they follow up on these federations, to make sure that we have grassroots competitions for young girls, and that there's also regional participation. So thank God that there's a whole $1 million from FIFA that goes towards regional organizations like SECAFA in East Africa, like COSAFA in Southern Africa, who have done a tremendous job organizing these tournaments, and also WAFU. WAFU is now coming on board, and also UNIFAC. In North Africa, there's been a couple of tournaments under 21 and under 17 with the girls playing. Burkina Faso, I think, were an invited team there. Morocco especially hosting all these tournaments and getting exposure as well, getting to understand what it means to play against sub-Saharan African teams who have a completely different style of play. So for me, where I stand, it's like we're heading in the right direction now more than ever. There's good energy, there's a good vibe about women. Sorry, who is that? Mute, please. Yeah, so there's a good energy, even from media. You have people like obviously like Janine Anthony, who have committed a lot of time to do stories about women's football with Ladies March. There's Eurama, with WOSU. There's also a couple of other people from across the continent that are doing an amazing job, to tell women's stories. Samuel Ahmadu is here on the bridge, apparently, every day waking up to look for stories and to tell the world that, look, there's also women's football on the African continent. So for me, it's a holistic approach, from everyone, the administrators, the journalists, the players themselves. You see them, they've created social media, sites where they are doing their own content, telling their own stories every day. They have all these hashtags, they're updating us, even within this pandemic, the stories that they're doing. You have someone like Jin Seninde, who is doing a couple of interviews on Instagram Live, to put and shine a light on so many of the women's, the women football players.
Okay, thank you, Usher. I think we'll come back to some questions. Let me quickly look at the effect of COVID-19 pandemic on women football. We have the positives and we have the negatives. I think Lydia can do justice to that, so that we'll look at the current situation we live in now with the pandemic outbreak and its effect on the women football in Africa. Thank you.
Okay, good morning or good afternoon, colleagues, depending on where you are in the world or in Africa. Thank you for inviting us for this debate and engaging with everyone. I think we've always engaged on WhatsApp or on Twitter and everything, and it's encouraging that now we are engaging on this kind of platform so that we can share ideas. And I think talking about such challenges that are faced by women's football is imperative for us in order to help change, the environment and what is happening in women's football for the better. So when I looked at the positives versus the negative of COVID-19, I think many of my colleagues will agree that there are more negatives than positives. But I will start with the positives that are really less. I think this kind of period gives us a time to reflect on where we come from as women's football on the continent and where we are going as well, in our different countries and in Africa, obviously from the CAF perspective. And also it gives us an opportunity to engage one another, because obviously we all have one common interest at heart, and that is the advancement of women's football in Africa, so that when we go out to the world, our women's teams can be on that level that other countries are at, and we have to look at doing things from different ways of doing things. I think we are in an era of, fourth industrial revolution, where we need to look at the use of technology more closely. How can we use technology to help us engage, and also for the performance of our teams? I mean, sports science and sports medicine is such a, you know, a rapidly growing um, environment or space that I feel like we are not capitalizing enough when it comes to African teams. You will see whenever we go compete against teams in Europe, in the US, and everything, you look at the kind of technology that they're using. The impact of our team's lines, it also, you know, it things like technology. We can use technology positively to impact our teams so that they can perform better in within the forward lines, you know, when it comes to playing against other teams. And also, you know, I think this space also, it gives the likes of CAF and the FAs, you know, the space to see how they can go about implementing the ideas that they came up with. Sorry, I've got members, you know, future Banyana stars in the background. So yeah, I was talking about